There's a book that I want to talk about, and it's called the 1984 by George Orwell. And this is a book that I read about 3 years ago, and I was recommended. I was recommended this book because it talks about a system that, well, bear in mind that somehow I'm related. You see, what in a way where my parents are from, the country used to be a communist country, and so in a way is related to 1984. But we go a bit more into why what is related, and but in the same time what isn't, because it isn't related. So let's talk about it, right. So it's a very interesting book because if you watch the movie, it goes very deep into what a system of control means, right. But 1984 takes it to an extreme level, and this has never been seen before. And I think you can say, oh well, the Soviet Union was like that. But even in the Soviet Union, I mean, you go back to like I'm talking about the countries that like my mom and dad come from, right? And countries called Romania. And my dad was a police officer, and then he was in the army. My mom was working in in back in those days was some sort of like power plant. Well, it was quite different. She did a different job then. And I remember that it was more like security of power plants, right? But the life that they experienced, and that in a way, because 1984 is about a system like the communist system, right? And I think the most the closest system or the closest ideology would be the communist ideology, which in a way they think people say that you have no freedom of speech and so on. But many people that lived in a communist country beg to differ because they have experienced a different way of life. And most people that have lived in a communist country and now it's become a democracy, they tend to say that it was better in a democracy than in a communist than it is in a democracy. And my dad was telling me that even normal people, like you didn't have to have an important job as a police officer or someone in the government. You could just be a barber, and everyone had in a way in money. You see, and everyone could do whatever they want. And I remember my dad was telling me that a lot of times people, like restaurants were full, bars were full. There was no such thing as everyone was working, everyone was producing, everyone was doing things, and there was no such thing as if you do something wrong, that's it. You'd be punished. You had freedom to do whatever you wanted, and of course, when it comes to like the leadership and all that, you couldn't really. Well, in today's society, it's the same thing. If you see something against the leadership or the society, sorry, against the leadership, you're gonna get in a way. There's a level of punishment that it comes with criticizing the leadership, right? Because of course, you know, everyone seems to think that you can just can just, but you have to understand that in a way, this if there's no control, there'll be chaos, and we've seen it so many times. There's an interesting book that I read, which was about the crowd. It's called The Crowd, and it talks about how people can, in normal circumstances in society, they can have a normal job. They can be a barber, they can be a lawyer, they can be. But this book goes back to the 19th century, to the Napoleon War, and it's really interesting because it talks about these people that, under normal circumstances in society, they obey and they do as they're told. But when they are in situations where, for example, in a war, they tend to produce, or they tend to make the most atrocities. You see, they tend to commit the most crimes. And these are people, they have no fear of God. they don't have any values when it comes to, so they just, so I feel like these people, they need to be put, they need to keep in control. Because if you don't control them, they will just pretty much unleash hell, right? And yeah, and that's what reminds me of like 1984. Now, of course, everyone that writes a book doesn't mean that is the truth, right? You have to remember that not everything that is written is true, and not everything that is true is written. So, um, of course, he wrote about something that, his idea of like he got inspired by the Soviet Union, so to speak, because there was no such thing in Britain. You know, um, Britain was, and many countries have been liberal, liberal democracy, but there's a level of liberty, and even in today's society, there's so much liberty, there's so much freedom. You can do whatever you want, and the idea of the fact that you have no freedom, when most people got to remember, we live in a society where everyone complains. Everyone, for some reason, they all come together and they complain. This is what I've realized, and everyone just moans and complains that that life is so bad, and they blame the government. Like, you have a conversation with a normal person, unsuccessful person, so to speak, and you ask them, and they will tell you that the reason why they're unhappy, they don't have this and they don't have that, is because of the government, or they'll blame someone else, not because of them, not because of the fact that they drink too much, they smoke too much, they take drugs, they don't clean up themselves, they don't have a clean house, they don't have a clean car. Um, it's not because of all that. It's because they don't even read to, because, it's something really interesting that I've heard. It says, if you read rubbish things, then how on earth can you have a positive mindset? How can you have a good life if you live on it, if you read on rubbish things, or if you watch rubbish things, you see? So that's one thing I wanted to mention, is the fact that you can read it, and it gives you an idea, but people that have never experienced, like people from the democratic countries, or countries like Britain or America, they can never understand the Soviet Union. They can read about it, but they've never had like parents or anyone that, or I've lived in that country, and I can tell you that how it is, and well, the communists fell in 1989, but you can see the remnants of it, and it's not as, you read a book like this and it kind of gives you a very dark understanding, and this has never, in a way, it's never happened, it will never happen, because of course it talks about control and control of thought and all that. But let me tell you one thing: everything you see in today's society, everything you see in the world, is not being created because of someone that wants to control you, or something negative, or something. It's all been created because the world wants to do something good. You have to remember there are more good people than bad people. There's this. It's like, of course you have to be careful with media as well. But what's happening at the moment is that people control on the 1%, 2% of in the world, which is negative, killing and things like this, right? War, small conflicts, right? And the 98% of the time is where good people do good things. Every single day, people do good things. People love each other, regardless of where they're from. You got, you got in a group, you can have 7, 8 different nations, 7, 8 men from 7, 8 different nations, and they all have in common the same thing. They have the same values, they have the same morals. They want a good life. They want to. Some people don't believe in God, some believe, but nevertheless, if you have the same values and morals, then this is what matters, right? It matters what you have in here and how you lead, how you conduct your life. And yeah, so really, but think about it, that it's not like the world is heading that way. It's never been that way. When people think about it, it's just drama. They attract to drama. Naturally, I think we attract to drama. Unsuccessful people, or people that have never fulfilled their dream. Because deep down, I think everyone has a dream. deep down there's something that everyone has, that everyone wants to do something but they can't, because either that they get distracted. Most of the time we get distracted, we can't do that, or they just don't try, and it comes with a level of frustration if you don't do it. Same as when you wake up and you want to do 20 push-ups, and you wake up and you take your phone, pick up your phone instead of doing push-ups, and then you realize you've been on the phone for 3 hours and you realize, oh, I've not done the 20 push-ups. You feel frustrated and think, I'm going to do it tomorrow, and then tomorrow you don't do it, and then here comes the third day and you've not done it, and you think, and that's when frustration comes from, and you've not kept your promise, you see. So, I can recommend to watch the movie as well. It's very dark, and yeah. But again, this is a book that they'll recommend it, that you will understand the system, you understand how it gives you some idea, it gives you an understanding, but nevertheless you understand how the normal person function, and you know that if they have no control, there's no control, these people will unleash hell. So they have to be controlled. You can see this in football. You can see how their dark side comes so quickly. They have no. It's like they can't hold themselves. So have a try on this one. So this was today's video. It's about 1984. And I want to make another video about another book that I strongly recommend, and that will be in the next video. I need to find a way to turn this off.